Monroe was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Monroe Document. I don't know. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Maduro was the king.
Shalom. I'd like to start out by giving all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Orkach, Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone. Shalom to the elect of Israel. This is Stamayim in Atlanta, and you see Emperor Nero there on the screen talking about a 2-century-year-old policy that is allowing them to take countries like Venezuela and countries here in the Western Hemisphere. They've talked about moving on to Colombia and to Mexico and to Cuba and wherever else in the Western Hemisphere that they believe that they deserve. Greenland's in the Western Hemisphere, Canada, and they've talked about this. These are things that they would like to do, coveting fields and taking them by violence. But I think it's pretty funny this megalomaniac has named it the Monroe Doctrine. From the Monroe Doctrine to the Monroe Doctrine, because he is, old Donnie. And I think that's hilarious, but, pride goeth before the fall, and we're watching these devils fall, these Edomites, in which he, on the screen, Nero is an Edomite, and people like him, so-called Caucasians and those tiny tops. Those are the Edomites primarily. I say primarily because not every quote-unquote white person you see is going to actually come from the seed through their father's lineage from Esau, Edom. They could come from Israelites, which are the Negroes, Latinos, or Native Americans, or they could come from any other nation through their father's seed. And, through the process of time, just mix with the Edomites or bred with the Edomites, in which that child that comes out is always going to be what the father was, no matter what it looks like, still what the father was. So just showing some of Esau's lies, saying that, or organizing people by colors, that's all a lie. And this policy of theirs is a lie as well. It's just something they use to justify their covetousness. But let's take a look at the Monroe Doctrine. I mean the Monroe Doctrine. But we're going to look at the Monroe because that's what we got. Well, I went straight to ChatGPT. I said, hey, summarize the Monroe Doctrine, please. Should have told him Baba Kasha, Shalom. Summarize the Monroe Doctrine, Baba Kasha. Which I do sometimes. But the Monroe Doctrine is a U.S. foreign policy principle announced in 1823 by President James Monroe. Here's a clear, concise summary. The core idea: the Western Hemisphere is closed to further European colonization or interference, and the United States will view such actions as hostile. And this all started with Russia, the U.S.'s ongoing enemy. It seems like forever, even going back here to these days. Russia took territory in Alaska, and this is the policy that came out of that to get Russia out of Alaska. Just saying, no more colonizing over here in the Western Hemisphere. We got this. Basically, in which Russia, understanding prophecy, Russia will have the last say on this. They're going to colonize this place with missiles. Coming real soon. But it says, main points: no new European colonization in the Americas. European powers should not interfere in the affairs of independent nations in the Western Hemisphere. In return, the U.S. would stay out of European wars and internal affairs. Well, then what about what's going on in Ukraine? It says, in World War I, World War II. It says existing European colonies in the Americas were left untouched. Why it matters? It asserted U.S. influence in the Americas. It was partly aimed at protecting newly independent Latin American countries from being recolonized. At first, it relied more on British naval power than U.S. military strength to be enforced. But the long-term impact, later used to justify U.S. intervention in Latin America, especially with the Roosevelt Corollary in the early 1900s. And the Roosevelt Corollary was basically how they took the Panama Canal. That's that speak softly but carry a big stick policy that Roosevelt had. Old Teddy Roosevelt and his roughnecks. It says, became a cornerstone of American foreign policy and hemispheric dominance. If you want, and this is what chat said. It said, if you want, I can also explain how it connects to modern U.S. foreign policy or compare it to doctrines like Manifest Destiny or the Truman Doctrine. And of course, I had to hear because they said Manifest Destiny. It piqued my interest. I said, please explain how it connects to modern U.S. foreign policy and Manifest Destiny. And they're like, gladly. It says, here's how the Monroe Doctrine connects to Manifest Destiny and to modern U.S. foreign policy, laid out clearly and honestly. Connection to Manifest Destiny, 19th century mindset. Manifest Destiny was the belief that the United States was divinely ordained to expand across North America. The Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny reinforced each other. Monroe Doctrine equals external boundary. So stay out of the West. So the Western Hemisphere makes up that external boundary. And then Manifest Destiny equals internal expansion. So they told Americans to expand westward and dominate the continent. And this is only to Edomites, quote unquote, white people, and the ones with those tiny tops. And then everybody else is just supposed to get dominated. But this is their policy. Actually, since we said policy, we should go right here to Daniel 8 and 25, which I want to get it here. In the blue letter, Daniel 8 and 25, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. That expansionist policy, the Monroe Doctrine is part of their policy, and Manifest Destiny is part of their policy. And it says, will cause craft to prosper in their hand, in his hand. So I want to get that word for craft, which is Strong's H 4820, marama, which is deceit and treachery, guile, false, feigned. In the sense of deceiving, fraud, craft, deceit, false, feigned, guile, subtly. We know that the beast was more subtle than the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. These people go back to the serpent through reincarnation from Cain, which Cain came from the serpent. And these people are Edomites. Treachery. Yeah, these are deceivers, and they've been able to use things like this, which sound good. Oops. Daniel 8. They've been able to use things like this, like the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny and the Doctrine of Discovery. They're different. They're wines. These are their different philosophies, and this has allowed them to push their deceit. It's allowed them to deceitfully steal away land and resources from people from the different nations, especially Jacob. And here in the Western Hemisphere, is Jacob. Jacob's the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. We're in these countries within the Western Hemisphere, but the Edomites are dominating and overseeing and seeing over us. They're setting the policies by which we live. They're providing the GMO foods in which we eat, and these crazy laws, which are their policies, which have confused everyone. But this is all deceit, and it's allowed them to take land and still look decent within the public eye up until now, and allows them to have justification for stealing these lands and resources. Because it's just theft. It's always theft, and it's only been theft. Daniel 8:25, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. And to preface this goes back to the time of the Maccabees. But there's no new thing under the sun, and the scripts repeat themselves. And this is happening again. They're using their policy to cause craft to prosper. Their deceit, it's deceitful how they're doing this. They said it was about drugs, but it's just to stop the foothold that China had down in Venezuela, and as well as other places. They want to take all the resources in the Western Hemisphere and have them for themselves, because they're about to get into World War III. And yeah, this is deceit. This is guile. And it says, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. These are very proud people. Just heard Nero talking about taking Greenland. And he said, yeah, they got their defenses up. They added one more dog sled or something like that. These are proud people. It's the other guy that said, yeah, we took it. We took Venezuela because we are a superpower. They're magnifying themselves. But pride comes before the fall, before destruction. And by peace shall destroy many. They say peace through strength. And they're just bringing war everywhere. He says he shall also stand up against the prince of princes. They're going to try to fight Yahushua when he returns. It says, but he shall be broken without hand. Ooh. We're getting there too. They're trying to expand and make themselves great again, and it's going to bring about World War III, and they're going to push out this MOTB for control as well, and then Yahushua is going to come back, and these missiles are going to fly, and Esau, you're going to be in chains. By the time the smoke of World War III clears and New Jerusalem comes back down, you will be in chains. He said that all of this is for naught. Let's get back to ChatGPT on the Monroe Doctrine and how it relates to modern policy. Moving down, it says, together they created, which together, the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny, it says, together they created a worldview where the Americas was seen as the U.S. sphere of influence. And it is. This is Esau's world. 2nd Ezra 6:9. Esau is the end of the world. Jacob's the beginning of it that follows. U.S. expansion was framed as moral, inevitable, and justified. And yes, it was. You were given the temporary blessing of the fatness of the earth and to live by your sword, the power of the sword. And so it just was what it was. The Lord used you to punish his people and to punish the other nations. You are the Lord's sword. It was inevitable for you to spread yourself in the way that you did, because you got the blessing of the fatness of the earth. And it's justified. You had that blessing to do that, to expand. But you went too hard, just like it says in Isaiah 47. So let's go there real quick. Isaiah 47:6. I was wroth with my people. Lord's people are the Israelites. The Israelites are the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. I have polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. This is speaking of the Edomites, primarily here in Babylon the Great, aka America. But all Edomites will be punished for this. And given them into thine hand, thou didst show them no mercy. No mercy whatsoever. It says, upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. And thou sayest, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. You went too hard, you did too much. And obviously, you have something to pay for. You have a lot to pay for. You committed blasphemy, painting white Jesus and calling him Jesus, the Christ, and you touched the apple of the Lord's eye. You got a lot to pay for. Didn't remember the latter end of it. That's why Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that follows. So that's Sirach 10. Unrighteous dealings, injuries. Sirach 10:8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. You did too much. Your unrighteous dealings, your Monroe Doctrine, your manifest destiny, these are unrighteous dealings. All those treaties you broke with the Gadites and with the Reubenites, these are unrighteous dealings. You've murdered countless people. All your riches are by deceit. You've stolen everything. So the kingdom is about to be translated, and you're trying to stop it, but it's not going to work. You can do nothing against Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. U.S. expansion was framed as moral, inevitable, and justified. Indigenous peoples, Mexico, and smaller nations were often treated as obstacles rather than equals. So our brothers Gad, Reuben, Issachar were just moved out of the way. We see that. And then they tried to, as they say, kill the Indian, save the man. After that, they indoctrinated us into how they think and how they move. Tried to kill us completely, everything. Key overlap, both relied on a sense of moral superiority and providence. Belief that U.S. power was righteous and necessary. And you're just going to be that great example, Esau. Moving on, it says evolution into interventionism. From the late 1800s to early 1900s, over time, Monroe Doctrine shifted from defensive to assertively imperial. Roosevelt corollary. This is that speak softly but carry a big stick policy. Through his policy, he shall cause craft to prosper. It says declare the U.S. had the right to intervene in Latin American nations to stabilize them. Justify military occupations in Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Nicaragua. These are all Israelites here in these places. Is that Cuba's Manasseh, Haiti's Levi, Dominican Republic, Simeon, Nicaragua. I'll look that up later. Slovakia. I think it's Asher, though. But correct me if I'm wrong. It says this marked a major change from Europe stay out to the U.S. will step in. This is where the Monroe Doctrine stops being a shield and becomes a sword. Speak softly, carry a big stick, and it goes straight into, actually, let's just get it here. Jeremiah 50:23. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? Because Babylon's ultimate manifest destiny is to be nuked by Russia. But their policy, these doctrines, these philosophies, their wines show that they are Babylon, that they are the wicked, that this right here, all of number 2 shows that they are the hammer of the whole earth. So stop being a shield and became a sword. Cold War, in which they are the sword of the Lord. Just let's get that really quick. I think it's Psalms 17. Psalm 17 and 13. Arise, O Lord, Yahweh Bashem El Rashai, disappoint him, cast him down. These are the Edomites. Deliver my soul from the wicked. The wicked are the children of Esau. You could go to Malachi 1 and 4. It says, which is thy sword? They are how the Lord punishes the nations, at least in this time period. He's lifted up the basest of men and used them to punish primarily his people, the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the Israelites, as well as our scattered, because we're scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth, but use them to punish us. But they've done so wickedly, and they did these things that it has to be punished as well. Retribution has to come for what they've done. The amount of people they've killed, the amount of things they've stolen, the lies they've told. There's a tab that is running. Getting back to this, Cold War. Modern U.S. foreign policy. During the Cold War, the doctrine was reinterpreted again. Communism replaced European empires as the outside threat. The U.S. used Monroe Doctrine logic to justify coups. So Guatemala in 1954, Chile in 1973, proxy wars in Nicaragua, El Salvador, embargoes in Cuba. Yeah, they use these things. Yeah, we gotta go send some democracy down there. We have to go liberate these people. Yeah, every time that any of that is done here in the Western Hemisphere, it goes back to this stuff. That's how Nero was able to get into Venezuela without declaring war and having the Senate have to pass war, because they just said it was a drug issue and used the Monroe Doctrine to get down there. These foreign ideologies have no place in the Western Hemisphere. Number 4, modern U.S. foreign policy post-Cold War II today. While rarely named outright, Monroe Doctrine thinking still appears in Latin America. Well, it's being named outright currently with the Monroe Doctrine. But it says Latin America, opposition to Chinese, Russian, or Iranian influence. That's exactly why they're in Venezuela. Sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and covert influence. Statements by U.S. officials are recently, as the 2010s, explicitly reaffirming the doctrine. Global version of Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny didn't disappear. It went global. And yeah, you got to even think with how they're trying to really control everything in the Western Hemisphere. They're thinking Manifest Destiny on Greenland, on Canada, on Mexico, on Cuba, on Venezuela, on Colombia, everywhere. Everywhere in the Western Hemisphere, but they're saying global. Let's listen. Since Manifest Destiny didn't disappear, it went global. Democracy, promotion. Yeah, you see that all over there in Western Asia. You see it in the Asian countries. They promote democracy. And then they bring with it alphabet agendas and all these abominable acts like feminism and other satanic doctrines. These are their wines. They transgress by wine and push it on all of the nations. Nope. Slovakia. Revelation 17 that I'm thinking of. And I can't find it just right off the bat, so we're gonna move on. Actually, all right, Slovakia. We'll just get this one here in Revelation 17 and 2. Uh-oh. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. This wine goes into philosophies, and this devil pushes his philosophies all around the earth. And we're coming to the point where these nations have had enough of their wine. They're throwing it up, they're vomiting it up, and they're going to be very upset when they sober up. But getting back here, it says global version of Manifest Destiny didn't disappear. It went global. Democracy promotion, rules-based international order. And we're seeing this devil break all that, and so these nations are getting upset with these rules that have been put in place. It says military bases worldwide, and we have the most military bases of any other country. We touch all of the nations. This is we have all the mingled people here, and we got bases everywhere. It says preemptive intervention logic. This reflects a shift from territorial expansion to ideological and strategic dominance. It says the core thread, power plus belief. Both the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny share a belief in exceptionalism, a conviction that U.S. dominance brings order, which is really bringing chaos. They're trying to bring their own order through their chaos that they push, because they usually have to have a FF, some kind of French fry, go on. It's kind of similar to the Boston Tea Party, where they dressed up like somebody else and blamed it on somebody else. And they do that all around the earth to push themselves into these places to justify. So it's really just chaos. It says a willingness to override sovereignty when deemed necessary, just like now. It says in biblical terms, which I know matter to you because ChatGPT is my friend. It says it echoes the tension between stewardship versus empire, defense versus domination. And yeah, this goes into. Actually, let's read this and then get some scripts. It says, bottom line, Monroe Doctrine created a hemispheric claim. Manifest Destiny justified expansion within it. Modern U.S. foreign policy globalized both ideas. Different language, same structure. We decide who belongs, who interferes, and when force is justified. He says, if you want, I can also critique this from a Christian worldview. No, but yeah. Monroe Doctrine is them controlling and policing the Western Hemisphere and not allowing anyone else to colonize here, even though that's what the U.S. does outside of the Western Hemisphere. That's why China is upset about Taiwan. That's why Russia is upset about Ukraine. It's because we're over there messing with stuff. And that's what the U.S. does. So let's get some scripts, wrap this up. But Habakkuk 2 and 5. Actually, 2 and 4. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. See, the Lord made this devil crooked. He made them to be evil and greedy and have a bloodlust and be deviant, sexual deviants, and all these things. These are the men of sin. This is the devil in the Bible. So, what else would you expect? Verse 5, yet also, because he transgresseth by wine. That wine is his philosophies. Monroe Doctrine is part of his philosophy. Manifest Destiny is part of his philosophy. His alphabet lifestyles, his feminism that he brings in, his democracy, his capitalism, his Judeo-Christianity. These are all philosophies. Judeo-Christianity isn't what the Bible says, by the way. That's why I even say that, because some people can't tell. What else? Just all of his ways, because it all lifts him up, never demonizes him in the slightest bit. And if you don't believe it, you're just wrong. You're just evil. This is how he dominates through his craft. So it's allowed his deceit to prosper. It says, because he transgresseth by wine, by his philosophies, by his Monroe doctrines, by his manifest destiny, he is a proud man. And this is the most proud. Daniel 7 talks about he whose pomp was more than his fellows. So here in America, these Babylonians, they have even more pride than the other Edomites, because this wine has never been called out. All of their ways haven't been called out. They haven't had to pay for these things, so it's just making their heads bigger and bigger and bigger. It says, neither keepeth at home. They don't keep at home. That's why they're in Venezuela. That's why they're talking about invading Greenland, talking about bombing Nigeria, which that's not Western Hemisphere, but that's not keeping it home. That's why they're talking about war in Taiwan, in Iran. It's just showing that this is the reiteration of the Roman Empire, and you're going to go out from expanding too far, having too many fronts. It says, who enlargeth his desire as hell and is as death. He's insatiable, and everywhere he goes, because he never keeps it home, everywhere he goes, he just brings death, because their ways are death. It's the opposite of the Lord's ways, so it's going to bring death. This is the man of sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. They say the law is done away with and give you their own laws. Sin brings death. He says, and cannot be satisfied, insatiable, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. And he's pulled everybody onto himself, but for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so, moving on, it says, shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him? That's what the world's currently doing, especially against Babylonians, and especially against those tiny tops. People see, and they're starting to understand that this is the problem. And say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, it's debt. It says, shall they not rise up suddenly, that shall bite thee, and awake, that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. For spoils, you're going to be spoiled. It says, once thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, because your whole house is going to suffer for what your elite have done. All of Edom is going to be done away with. There's not going to be any nephew or son, nobody of the house of Esau, after they serve out their punishment of slavery. It's going to be a hardcore slavery as well. But Emperor Nero, will be no more, and all his people. And he's not even the elite of the elite. He's not the cream of the crop. He's just a face. But that's the face of an Edomite, so to help you see. And you can identify them by their spirit, which goes into these philosophies. They believe this stuff wholeheartedly and won't let up on it. But it's going to be the end of them. It says, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house. His house is race. It says that he may set his nest on high, and that's what they did. Their Edomite supremacy that they pushed around this earth, that was on high. That he may be delivered from the power of evil. And stand now with thine enchantments. So be, thou mayest prevail. I might have butchered that, but yeah, these Edomites, stand with your philosophies and all this wine you've been pushing around, because the Lord is about to turn it all around on you. So, Lord willing, that was edifying. I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakach, Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the great millstone. Shalom to the elect of Israel. Shalom.